In late 2024, Waste Management opened what they called a flagship recycling facility. $150 million. 5 buildings spread across 150 acres in Waller County, Texas. State-of-the-art technology designed to turn your grocery bags and pallet wrap into brand new plastic pellets. The future of recycling, they said. A closed-loop system that would finally prove plastic did not have to end up in a landfill. Less than 12 months later, they shut it down. 88 workers received permanent layoff notices. The machines went silent. The pellet lines stopped running. And America's largest waste company walked away from its own flagship investment like it never happened. Here is the number that matters. Waste Management made $22 billion in revenue last year. Their CEO took home $17 million in total compensation, and they could not keep a single recycling plant running for 1 full year. But here is where it gets interesting. This was not a failure. This was a pattern. In California, a company called Our Planet Earth had everything recyclers say they need to survive. State subsidies, recycled content mandates, a bottle deposit law that guaranteed clean material. They still went bankrupt. In Indiana, a chemical recycling startup called Brightmark built a facility designed to process 100,000 metric tons of plastic per year. After 4 years of operation, it was running at 5% capacity. Then it filed for bankruptcy with $178 million in debt. Across Europe, almost 1 million tons of recycling capacity has vanished since 2023. The Netherlands alone lost 7 plants in a single year. Something is killing the recycling industry, and it is not what you think. The Natura PCR facility sat about 40 miles northwest of Houston in a stretch of Waller County where farmland meets industrial sprawl. From the outside, it looked like exactly what recycling was supposed to become. Gleaming, massive, built to scale, 5 buildings spread across 150 acres, sorting lines that could process 7.5 million pounds of plastic resin every single month. Technology designed to take the plastic film that clogs up every other recycling system in America and turn it into something usable. Grocery bags, pallet wrap, stretch film from warehouses and distribution centers. The stuff that tangles in machinery and contaminates bales and makes recycling plant managers lose sleep. Natura was supposed to solve that problem. Waste Management acquired a controlling stake in the operation back in 2022 when a company called Avantgarde Innovative was running the show. The acquisition came with grand ambitions: scale to 400 million pounds of post-consumer resin per year within 5 years, build a second plant somewhere in the Midwest, partner with Dow Chemical to launch the first major residential plastic film recycling program in American history, get film recycling into 8% of US households by 2025. The CEO of Waste Management, a man named Jim Fish, put it this way when the deal closed: WM's controlling interest in Natura PCR positions us to grow and scale rapidly in the emerging PCR space. He talked about untapped potential, about helping customers close the loop, about bringing more recycled materials to store shelves. The company poured another $125 million into expansion plans. They upgraded the Waller facility. They broke ground on a new plant in Indiana that was supposed to come online in 2024. They told investors this was the future. They told shareholders this was a growth opportunity. They told the public this was how recycling was finally going to work. And then in late 2024, the new facility opened. The machines started running. The workers showed up. The pellets started flowing for about 11 months. Here is the question nobody at Waste Management has answered. What changed between 2022, when this was the future of recycling, and October 2025, when they walked away from $150 million and told 88 workers their jobs were permanently gone? The company says adverse market conditions, decreasing customer demand. But those words do not explain what actually happened. They do not explain why the largest waste company in North America, with $22 billion in annual revenue, could not make a single recycling plant work. Let me show you the numbers that make this make no sense. Waste Management reported $22.06 billion in revenue for 2024. That is an 8% increase from the year before. Their market capitalization sits at $87 billion, making them one of the most valuable companies in the waste industry on the planet. They operate the largest disposal network in North America, the largest collection fleet, the largest recycler of post-consumer materials. They run more landfill gas to electricity plants than anyone else on the continent. Their CEO, Jim Fish, took home $17.1 million in total compensation last year. About $1.4 million came as base salary. The rest arrived as stock awards, bonuses, and incentive payments. He has been running the company since 2016 and directly owns shares worth $48 million. Now here is the number that matters. The Natura PCR facility cost $150 million. That is 0.7% of what the company makes in a single year. Less than 1%. They spent more than that on dividend payments in a single quarter, and they could not keep it running for 12 months. The company returned $1.47 billion to shareholders in 2024. That included over $1.2 billion in dividend alone. In December 2025, the board announced a 14.5% dividend increase for the coming year. They authorized a $3 billion share buyback program. They told investors the company was positioned to deliver outsized shareholder returns in 2026. But they could not find the economics to keep 88 workers employed at a recycling plant in Texas. Here is what the company said when they shut it down. Due to adverse market conditions and decreasing customer demand for LDPE and LLDPE PCR pellets processed at Natura PCR, the plant has been temporarily closed. If market conditions and demand for PCR pellets improve, WM may evaluate the potential of reopening the facility. May evaluate, not will. May. The layoffs were not temporary. The company filed paperwork with the Texas Workforce Commission classifying them as permanent. Technicians, maintenance staff, engineers, lab technicians, none of them represented by a union, all of them out of work by the end of December. So the question becomes simple. A company worth $87 billion, a CEO making $17 million a year, record revenue, record margins, and they looked at a $150 million recycling investment and decided it was not worth saving. They decided 88 jobs were not worth protecting. They decided the future of plastic film recycling was not worth fighting for. The answer is not that they could not afford it. The answer is that something else was broken. To understand why Waste Management walked away, you have to understand what was supposed to happen. And what was supposed to happen started with promises. Around 2018, something shifted. The public started paying attention to plastic. Images of ocean garbage patches went viral. Documentaries showed whales dying with stomachs full of bags. Teenagers organized school strikes. Shareholders started asking uncomfortable questions. And the biggest consumer brands in the world realized they had a problem, so they made commitments. Coca-Cola announced they would use 50% recycled material in their packaging by 2030. PepsiCo set targets. Danone pledged 25% recycled content overall and 50% for water bottles by 2025. Nestle, Unilever, Procter & Gamble. One after another, the companies that produce the most plastic packaging on Earth stood up and promised to buy recycled material, to close the loop, to be part of the solution. Those commitments were supposed to create demand. If brands promised to buy recycled plastic, then recyclers would have customers. If recyclers had customers, they could build facilities. If facilities got built, plastic would stop going to landfills. The whole system would finally work. That was the theory. Here is what actually happened. Coca-Cola reached 28% recycled content across all materials last year. Then they quietly walked back their goals. The company said they were evolving their targets. Danone hit 17% recycled content overall against their 25% target. For water bottles, they reached 29% against a goal of 50%. A company spokesperson blamed systemic barriers. the underdevelopment of collection and recycling infrastructure, the scarcity of recycled materials. But the materials were not scarce. The facilities existed. Natura had capacity. Our Planet had capacity. Brightmark was supposed to have capacity. The problem was not supply. The problem was that the brands stopped buying. The Association of Plastic Recyclers put out a statement after Our Planet Earth collapsed in California. They did not mince words. Like many US recyclers, Our Planet Earth faced low demand for its products while competing against a surge of low-cost imported material and cheap, oversupplied virgin plastic. These dynamics are driven by two factors: brands pulling away from recycled content commitments to instead buy more new virgin plastic, and brands choosing to buy imported rPET to meet their US recycled content requirements instead of buying from US recyclers. Read that again. The brands who promised to save recycling are the same brands who killed it. They either bought virgin plastic because it was cheaper, or they bought recycled plastic from overseas because it was cheaper. Either way, American recyclers got nothing. A woman named Jan Dell runs an organization called the Last Beach Cleanup. She has been tracking this for years. By my count, she said, in the US, more plastic recyclers have shut down than started up between 2018, when China banned imports of our plastic waste, and 2025, more closures than openings in 7 years. While every major brand on Earth was promising to buy more recycled content, Kelly McBee works for a shareholder activist group called As You Sow. She put the question plainly: at what point are these company commitments greenwashing? At what point are companies selling a vision for their future that they are not able to implement? But the broken promises only tell half the story. The other half is math, and the math has been rigged from the start. Virgin plastic is cheaper than recycled plastic. It has always been cheaper. And right now, in 2025, the gap is wider than it has been in years. Here is why. The companies that make new plastic have been building, expanding, adding capacity. The global supply of virgin polyethylene has exploded, and all that new production has driven prices into the floor. When you can buy fresh plastic for less than it costs to process old plastic, the economics of recycling collapse. It does not matter how good your technology is. It does not matter how efficient your facility is. It does not matter how much you invested. If your product costs more than the alternative, nobody buys it. And that is exactly what happened at Natura. The facility was designed to produce LDPE and LLDPE pellets, low-density and linear low-density polyethylene, the stuff that goes into new plastic film. But by the time the plant was running at full speed, the market for those pellets had cratered. Brands that once promised to pay a premium for recycled content decided they would rather save money. They switched back to virgin. They bought imports. They walked away from the recyclers who built capacity specifically to meet their commitments. The numbers are brutal. Since October 2024, PT bales have lost nearly 3/4 of their value, 75% gone in 12 months. Colored HDPE bales dropped 62%. Even natural HDPE, the material with the most consistent demand in the industry, fell 10% despite hitting record highs earlier in the year. Here is the paradox that makes this even stranger. Film bale pricing stayed flat. A grade film still trades at about 18 cents per pound. B grade sits around 7 cents. Those prices have barely moved in a year. The reason is simple. There is not enough recycling-grade film material available. Collection rates are terrible. Contamination is everywhere. The supply is constrained, so the raw material holds its value. But the finished product has no buyers. Natura could get the plastic. They could process it. They could turn it into pellets. But when those pellets came off the line, nobody wanted them. Not at the price it cost to make them. Not when virgin plastic was sitting right there, cheaper and easier. The Association of Plastic Recyclers said it plainly. The sad truth is that this closure underscores that plastics recycling is a tough business. And until recycling plastics is equal to or more profitable than making new plastic, the US will not make any significant progress in reducing plastic pollution. That is not a prediction. That is a diagnosis. And nobody in power is writing a prescription. If you have made it this far, you now understand why a $22 billion company walked away from $150 million. You understand why the brands who promised to save the planet quietly stopped buying recycled plastic. And you understand why Virgin always wins. Comment the number 2 below if you are starting to see how this system was rigged from the beginning. If you are not subscribed, now is the time. Hit the bell so you do not miss what comes next. Your support helps us keep digging into stories like this one, the ones that expose what corporations would rather you never find out. Because we are not done. What happened at Natura was not an accident, it was a pattern. And that pattern is spreading across the entire country. If Natura were the only facility to shut down, you could call it a business failure, bad management, poor timing, a bet that did not pay off. But Natura is not alone. What happened in Waller County, Texas is happening everywhere. And once you start counting the bodies, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Start in California. Our planet Earth was supposed to be the model. They had everything. The state offers financial support to recyclers. California has a recycled content mandate that requires brands to use post-consumer material. The bottle deposit law has been running for decades, which means clean sorted PET flows into the system every single day. If plastic recycling was going to work anywhere in America, it should have worked in California. Our planet Earth shut down in September 2025, just weeks before Natura went dark. The closure was a shutdown for the industry. Jan Dell from the Last Beach Cleanup said it directly. All the so-called supporting policy that the recyclers say is needed to make plastic recycling work exists in California, and that plant still shut down because it could not make money. He said it directly and noted the shutdown. Moved to Indiana. A company called Brightmark built a chemical recycling facility in Ashley. This was supposed to be the next generation. Pyrolysis technology that could take mixed plastics, the stuff nobody else wanted, and break it down into fuel and feedstock. They announced the project in 2015, broke ground in 2019, closed financing worth $260 million, including $185 million in green bonds. After 4 years of operation, the facility had processed a total of 4 million pounds of plastic, total. The design capacity was 200 million pounds per year. They were running at 5%. The facility cost $3.5 to $4 million per month just to keep the lights on. In March 2025, the subsidiary filed for bankruptcy, $178 million in debt. The parent company said they might sell the facility. They also said they were still planning to build a $950 million plant in Georgia. This period of 4 years ended in bankruptcy. Go to Minnesota. A company called MyPlas USA opened a plastic film recycling facility in Rogers. Brand new, state-of-the-art. It lasted 2 months before financial difficulties forced them to close. The situation in Minnesota highlighted the financial challenges. Now cross the Atlantic. Plastics recyclers. Europe has been tracking facility closures across the continent. By the end of 2025, they estimate the industry will have lost almost 1 million tons of recycling capacity since 2023. The Netherlands alone saw 7 plants close in 2024. Between January and July of 2025, Europe lost nearly as much capacity as it did in all of 2024. By year-end, closures could triple what they were in 2023. A research firm called LUX put out a report earlier this year. Their assessment was blunt. 2025 stands to be a year of broken promises. Over 50% of the projects scheduled for completion in 2025 are expected to miss their deadlines, especially those with 6-figure metric ton per year capacities. This is not one company failing. This is not one bad investment. This is an entire industry collapsing in real time, while the companies that created the plastic keep making more of it. The numbers tell one story. The people tell another. 88 workers showed up to the Natura PCR facility in Waller County expecting to build something. They were technicians who kept the sorting lines running, maintenance staff who fixed what broke, engineers who optimized the systems, lab technicians who tested the pellets for quality and consistency. They took jobs at a $150 million facility owned by the largest waste company in North America. They probably thought it was stable work. The layoffs began on October 15, 2025. According to the WARN notice filed with the Texas Workforce Commission, workers would remain on payroll with full pay and benefits until December 31st. A nice way of saying they had 10 weeks to find something else. The notice made clear that while operations had been temporarily halted, the layoffs themselves were permanent. Every single one of them. None of the affected employees were represented by a union. The company did not say they would reopen. They said they may evaluate the potential of reopening if market conditions improve, if demand comes back, if. Meanwhile, the executives kept getting paid. The shareholders kept getting paid. In 2024 alone, Waste Management returned $1.47 billion to shareholders. That included $1.2 billion in dividends. The board announced a 14.5% dividend increase heading into 2026. They authorized a $3 billion share buyback program. The CEO made $17 million, and 88 workers in a small Texas county lost their jobs 11 months after the plant opened. This was not an isolated event. Texas saw thousands of layoffs in 2025. Tyson Foods announced it would cut 1,761 jobs at a beef plant in Amarillo. FedEx said it would close a facility in Coppell and eliminate 856 positions. Across the state, warehouses shut down. Distribution centers contracted. Manufacturing lines went quiet. But there is something different about what happened at Natura. Those other closures came from companies struggling to stay profitable. Waste Management is not struggling. They posted record revenue, record margins, record cash flow. They had the money to keep 88 workers employed. They chose not to. When a company worth $87 billion decides that 88 jobs are not worth saving, that is not economics. That is a choice. And the workers are the ones who pay for it. So what does this actually mean? What does it tell us when the largest waste company in North America pours $150 million into a recycling facility and abandons it in less than a year? What does it tell us when California has every policy recyclers say they need and plants still go bankrupt? What does it tell us when Europe loses 1 million tons of capacity while politicians keep talking about circular economies? It tells us the system was never designed to work. Recycling in America was built on a BET. The BET was that brands would keep their promises, that consumer demand for sustainable products would force companies to buy recycled content even when virgin plastic was cheaper, that the market would solve the problem without government intervention, that BET lost. The infrastructure exists. Natura had the technology. Our Planet had the technology. Brightmark had the technology. The facilities were built. The workers were trained. The machines were ready. What did not exist was demand. And without demand, the whole system collapses. Here is what would have to change for any of this to work. Mandatory recycled content requirements with actual enforcement mechanisms. Trade protections against cheap imports that undercut domestic recyclers. Tax incentives that make recycled plastic competitive with virgin. Penalties for brands that announce commitments and then quietly walk away. None of that is coming. The current administration has shown no interest in regulating plastics. Global negotiations for a plastics treaty collapsed without an agreement. Brands are retreating from their own sustainability goals, not advancing toward them. The shareholder activists at As You Sow are worried that companies will abandon even the commitments they have already made. So here's the question that remains. If Waste Management, with $22 billion in revenue and partnerships with Dow Chemical and the largest collection infrastructure in North America, cannot make plastic film recycling work, then who can? If California, with subsidies and mandates and deposit laws, cannot keep a recycler open, then what state can? If Europe, with all its regulations and directives, is losing capacity faster than it can build it, then what happens next? The answer might be that nobody can. Not under the current rules. Not while virgin plastic stays cheap. Not while brands face no consequences for breaking their promises. That is the story of Natura. Not a business failure. A system failure. And 88 workers are not the last ones who will pay the price.